They're back.
They're back. They're back.
He's back.
Hello.
Oh, thank you.
Lola.
Yeah.
Lola's back. The LSA conference hosts are back.
Yeah, we are back.
Lola, can you wave? Lola.
We had a glitch.
A glitch. Okay, we're used to glitches, huh? We're used to glitches.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Back. Okay, Carly, over to you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. I want to congratulate Dr. Lola Akande on publishing another novel. Like her previous works, this novel engages fearlessly with social realities. In her first novel, What It Takes, Dr. Akande bravely took on sexual exploitation of students some time before Me Too or the BBC documentary Sex for Grades. In Where Are You From?, she tackled the topic of the National Youth Service Corps program as a way of engaging with Nigeria's ethnic divisions before the 2023 elections brought these back into the line of global vision. In this latest novel, The Truth About Sadia, Dr. Akande has again taken on a large social topic and done the research to write a novel that engages with and reflects on addictions of all kinds. The novel has on its cover an image of a young woman. I can see copies on the table there. A young woman whose disheveled appearance made me fear for her. I had assumed that Sadia, the protagonist, would succumb to addiction, and I kept waiting for this moment to happen. The novel allows us to come to the ending without Sadia herself succumbing, but her hair on the cover of the book contains the plot line. At the bottom, we see a pen representing her desire for self-improvement and education. We see a ring representing her desire for a stable relationship and marriage. And we see a baby's pacifier. I don't know if that's what it's called in Nigeria, a pacifier or a dummy, to represent the arrival of a baby. Yet nearer the top of her head, and as her hair grows upwards, we see the maggot her brother has implanted in her when she's a small girl, and the pills that destroy her life through her husband's addiction. The truth in a Lola Akande novel is always linked to disillusionment. The Lola Akande heroine or protagonist has, to quote her first novel, what it takes to be a good person. Her young female protagonists are like a group of sisters, beautiful, honest, kind, and always full of hope. The truth that dawns on them is that this world does not reward goodness. A Lola Akande heroine's goodness is always challenged, her hopes are always dashed. The disillusionment of the good woman is the DNA of Dr. Lola Akande's works. Her novels end with the admirable heroine in recovery from disillusionment, and sometimes Dr. Akande seems to give them a new chance at happiness. What It Takes has this format and is muted but has an optimistic ending. The Truth About Sadia has been endorsed by the Nigerian National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and I'd be very eager to understand what that means and also who and where Dr. Akande's readers are. The novels are engaged in education and can be read as fictional self-improvement narratives. We all know how popular self-help genres are across Africa. Walk into any bookshop and this is the largest section. I don't know whether this is true for Jazz Hall and Glendora, but every other bookshop I've walked into, self-help books are the largest group. The self-improvement forms that Dr. Akande employs require the author to break down her heroines, to create for them moments of disillusionment that make them stronger. It can be a painful experience to read these novels, as we are so eager for life to be kind to these good women. Now I want to remark on the theme of addiction. There is an obvious theme of addiction, namely that of Mofeoluwa Ayowumi Bolarinwa, the man who at first appears to be love's young dream. He's a man who, when we first encounter him, seems to have all the traits that Sadia had hoped to find in a partner. The reader is alerted at various moments in the novel that all is not as it seems. Since we know of the curse that Sadia's brother has had placed on her, we know this romance will not end well. The various substance addictions that Morphe develops destroys his life, various forms destroy his life, and also the life of Sadia and their baby child. But there's another addiction in the novel, and that is Sadia's own addiction, because Sadia is addicted to romance. And this addiction, as much as Morphe's addiction to substances, ruins her life. I want to point out to the way Dr. Akande structures the novel around Sadia's consciousness. So if you will allow me, I'll read out two sentences. On page 14, we read, "The kiss was as tender as she'd known it would be. He kissed her again, and she responded with a greed that left her weak. Her arms wound their way round his neck, and she leaned against him. She felt his hands in her hair." That's page 14, right at the outset. After many disappointments, and after the reader has given up on Morphe, Sadia reconciles with him, and we read on page 139. Now listen to the repetition of the words. Her arms wound their way round his neck, and she leaned against him. She felt his hands in her hair, his fingers tangling in its length. Her happiness had been restored. And the reader just feels, Sadia, have you learned nothing? That even the way she responds uses exactly the same words. Then later on, with a man who is married and who has an affair with Sadia, we read Sadia say, she had rarely known such love. No, we want to shout to her. Again, poor Sadia's addiction to romance is what ruins her life. That perhaps is the curse. So how will this end? How will Sadia escape the cycle of her addiction to romance and love, which is, one might say, the true source of the despair experienced by the sisterhood in Dr. Akande's novels? Thank you, Dr. Akande, for your latest work and for your contribution to politically engaged literary production. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Carly, for very interesting observations on the truth about Sadia. And for our audience, can you see? I thought that was wonderful that you even mentioned the stuff in the hair, all the motifs in the hair. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that a review. And for sticking to time. You've all been great so far. So we'd like to move on to the comments review by Dr. Adedoyin Agbuoru of the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. And before she starts, I'd like to present her career profile, a summary. Adedoyin Agbuoru, recipient of the Association of Nigerian Authors, Oyo, 2022 Distinction Award, holds degrees in International Relations, English Studies, and Comparative Studies from Obafemi Awolowo University, University of Ibadan, and University of Ilorin. She was a visiting scholar at the Arts Research Center, Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan, in 2007. Her research interests include related discourses, comparative studies, national and cultural identity, specifically Nigerian and Japanese theatrical traditions. An insightful playwright and director, her works include Refugees of the Great Lakes, Stolen Seeds, and She. These are plays. A Voyage Around W.S. Wole Soyinka, biographical narrative, and Drama in Africa, a critical text. Doyin Agbuoru, editor, studies, it's also editor of studies in transnational Africa and Japan, and is currently director, Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at the University of Ibadan. Adedoyin Agbuoru is an associate professor at the Department of English, the University of Ibadan. So, Doyin, over to you and welcome.
Thank you very much. I also think it's an honor to be invited to this panel. I'd like to start by congratulating Dr. Akande for this book.
Joy, can you raise your volume, your speech? Can you just speak a little bit loud?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is it better? Okay.
Just louder,
So
just louder.
Okay, so I was just saying that I'm happy that you invited me to this panel, and I just congratulated Dr. Akande for this book that's been so beautifully put together. So I begin my reflections on the truth about Sadia by commending Dr. Akande for boldly taking on the themes that she has worked on and for the positive energy that she has generated by these themes. Drug and substance abuse is a real menace, as we know, and social avarice. And the dimensions this has taken in society is unquantifiable. Those who suffer these self-inflicted addictions are innumerable, and especially because I've been privileged to work with a number of young people, outside the classroom since I began working in UI.
So can you speak a bit louder? Sorry to interrupt. Can you speak a bit louder? It's not loud enough. Can you? I think it's use my earpiece
so that you can hear me. I'll use my earpiece. Is it better now? I hope it's better.
Well, for us, it has never been an issue for people online. Chair, can you hear more clearly now? You are muted, ma.
You're muted.
Chair, speak.
Can you hear?
Can you hear more now? Can you hear
Yes.
better now? Okay. So, well, I'll just continue. I think that Dr. Ademola was saying that they can hear. Okay, fine. All right, so let me just roll. So I was just saying that, that the number and the percentage of people that are involved in these addictions, are not limited by age or by class. That was where I ended. So the trade in those substances and how the society can curb this is a constant and a continuous conversation. So Akande, in portraying the Yaba Psychiatric Hospital and the success rates achieved when the patient cooperates also shows that there's hope for those who genuinely want to be free from drug abuse and the attendant challenges. So the truth about Sadia is therefore coming at the right time. And there must be an effort to put this book in the hands of as many people as possible, young, old, across gender, to see the reality of the consequences of substance abuse. Because at times, once those who are involved are taken out of the way, others really cannot see what happens when you choose to live in a particular way, that influences all other aspects of your life. So having said that, I'd like to share some of my thoughts on the style and the narrative, as well as the construction of the plot as structure and the plot as storyline. How the characters that Lola Akande have created are able to plausibly convey the message and the theme the novel preoccupies itself with. So thematically, my first observation is that sibling rivalry is depicted in an absolutely shocking manner. Sibling rivalry is an archetypal theme. And this is, I think it's on this that Akande pitches her conflict in both families. The extent of the hatred that a sibling can have for another one to want to supernaturally ensure that her life is difficult, complex, that she could even go to the extent of telling the medicine man to make her repellent to men. Then the witch doctor actually says her fate is sealed and that the maggot will be there for as long as she lives, and the men will feel what people feel for a maggot. It's a symbol of decay. I think that is startling. Why would a sibling do that to another sibling? It's also instructive that Akande reinforces the fact that men know, from that gender slant, that if a woman is successfully married, she'll be successful. So I think that's why she just knew, if I take care of this aspect of her life, she'll be in trouble, for the rest in every other way. Now, I also want to look at the level of hatred in Mofe's case, as his brother hates him so much for intervening in his marital affairs and deliberately introduces him to drugs, discourages Sadia from even marrying him, knowing fully well that he had also, to borrow the witch doctor's word, sealed his fate and wants him to die at the traditional psychiatric hospital, ward. When he survives that, he deceives him and takes him to battle, then runs him over with his vehicle and leaves him there to die. So the author is able to accurately paint, a picture of poverty and extreme suffering of the masses. I also take note of that in terms of setting. Now, we're shown that there's sacrifices that members of families have to make. The father of Akin Oyelowo, a laborer, having to advise his son to forfeit his educational pursuit for the sake of family. So that sacrifice that he makes, he's sincere about making the sacrifice, because it's because of that sacrifice that he decided.
A hitch, let me. Hello there. A hitch, which is there's a
Right. It's a
glitch.
connection issue from my end.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so just give a few moments. It might clear very soon.
Yeah.
I'll write to her. What I suggest we do, is, so we won't waste valuable time, is we'll move to Gabriel Bangoshe, and Doyin can take her full paper afterwards. So we won't waste valuable time. We will start with Doyin when she comes back. Gabriel has been with us. Gabriel is with us. So let me move on to Gabriel Bangoshe now. Welcome. Gabriel Bangoshe is Assistant Professor of African and Comparative Literature at the University of California, San Diego. He is a poet, literary critic, and translator. He thinks and writes about African women's poetry, Black poetics, African literature, feminist, post-colonial, and decolonial thoughts. Bangoshe's work has appeared in Ariel, African Literature Today, Comparative Literature and Culture, Contemporary Humanities, and Ideas and Futures, among other venues. So, very big welcome to Gabriel Bangoshe, who's been here right from the beginning. And we'd like to hear from you, your views, your responses to the wonderful novel by Dr. Lola Akande, The Truth About Sadia. Over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to Dr. Lola Akande for this beautiful gift. And I will keep my comment very short because of time. Lola Akande's novel, The Truth About Sadia, is a riveting narrative portrayal of life in the post-colonial city of Lagos, exploring the experience of Sadia and the people in our world. Everything revolves around Sadia. As we can see from the cover, she carries the whole burden of everyone and her own life in her hair. And I think that's a very creative mapping of Sadia's character. As a central female character whose life, the novel traces from 4 to 50 in 27 chapters, enveloped between a prologue and an epilogue. Sadia is written by her uncle, Akin, who represents the father figure in the Oyelowo family as a result of his position as the first son and, of course, his economic power. Sadia's marriage to Mofe Bolarinwa turns tragic as a result of Mofe's alcohol abuse and drug addiction. This singular tragedy, arched in the complex web of family intrigues, turns Sadia's promising life upside down. In a review in the Vanguard newspaper, Priska Samduru designates the novel as, quote, a gripping tale on war drug, which echoes the global, of course, US wars on drugs. Of course, this framing reiterates the novel's paratext that foregrounds its fictional diagnosis of the public health problem of drug and substance abuse, mental illness, and social attitude towards mental health issues in a post-colonial society. And of course, from the book cover and preliminary pages, we find, the endorsement by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. And we also find an epigraph from Sarah Kane about, drug abuse. And likewise, if you look at the blurb, the novel is described, and I quote, as an exploration of, quote, how the use of alcohol and hard drugs can lead to the development of mental illness, end quote. This statement then serves as a narrative anchor, grounding Sadia's story. Indeed, the character of Mofe and people's perception of his drug-induced madness, or better still, mental disorder, shows the writer's consciousness of the role of narrative fiction in public health education and awareness. And specifically, if you look at chapters 15 and 16, we confront a scene of sensitization about mental health, but I won't go into that details. Framed as such, the novel fulfills the requirement of a Roman artist directed at the social malady of drug abuse and its associated mental and social disorder. However, in its realist third-person omniscient narrative of life in Lagos, the novel offers another fictional diagnosis of a fundamental problem that opens up the narrative space for demoralizing discourse of drug abuse and mental health crisis. It provides a critical diagnosis of patriarchal madness that emanates from the commandment of the Father. And I'm going to focus the remaining part of my presentation on what I call the commandment of the Father. The novel captures the patriarchal commandment in the attitude of such father figures as Akin of the Oyelowo family and Aremo of the Bolarinwa family, whose power produces gender violence in their dysfunctional family. And I'm using the concept of patriarchal commandment to articulate the problem of male domination in the novel, drawing on Akin's repeated deployment of the lexicon of command. And of course, I'm also thinking about this repeated use of command in relation to what Achille Bembe has described as the commandement, of course, in the colonial context. But what I find interesting in this conceptualization is that it helps us to think about the exercising of command and how power itself is sort of structured on the notion of command. How do you command the obedience of the other? Of course, Mbembe is thinking about the colonial context, but in the context of gender power relations compounded by the dynamics of class and seniority. The father figures in the novel exhibit patriarchal commandment in their will to control and demand forceful obedience from others. Sadia, like her sister Tunmike, is forced to live under the shadow of Akin Oyelowo's power. In Mofe's family, Aremo controls the affairs of the Bolarinwas, including his wife, Auntie Bumi, and his siblings, Bayowa and Tosin. The prologue portrays the extent of the patriarchal commandment that predetermines the rhythm of Sadia's life. It captures the foundation of a problem as a female subject and foreshadows the unending sufferings and pains that would define Sadia's life. Under the force of the patriarchal commandment, Sadia is supposed to be eternally dependent on the father without the agency and autonomy to determine the course of her own life. The scene of ritualized violation of her body, and that is how I'm reading the prologue, where we see the medicine man insert a maggot at the will, of course, at the command of Akin, repeats the diverse forms of Sadia of the diverse forms of violence or the violation that Sadia will move through throughout her life. And even though there is a marked narrative ellipsis after the prologue, and of course, coming back to what has been described earlier as the gaps in the narratives, that narrative also helps us to think about the kind of life that Sadia will live as a wife, mother, a single mother, and then a widow. Even though Sadia herself is not aware of this foundational problem. And I find this situational irony interesting because it accentuates the tacit yet forceful operation of the patriarchal commandment. It is not visible to the subject. At the same time, it saturates their entire life. And I'm just going to draw attention to two moments, and I'm going to end so that others can have the opportunity to have their presentation. One of the moments, and I'm going to focus on the figure of Akande specifically, is when Akande accuses Sadia of ingratitude and views her educational attainment as a threat to, I quote, his place in the family. And this is after Mofe's death, when Akande and Tunmike were having conversation about how Akande reacts to, the tragedy without empathy. And what I find interesting here is the use of free indirect discourse and rhetorical question, through which the narrator plumbs the depth of Akande's patriarchal consciousness. And I'm just going to read this quote on page 234 to 235. And this is, in free indirect discourse, of course, taking us through the consciousness of Akande. He found it laughable that a mere woman would dream of rising above her elder male sibling, simply because she had an education. In what part of her family history did she come across a situation in which a woman rose above a man? All women of Oyelowo family before her had been shown their place, their limits, and they had been obediently, unquestioningly done as they were told, educated or not. Plus, wasn't it through his benevolence that Sadia was able to acquire education? Would she have come this far without him, the alpha male? And we can see, how this free indirect discourse sort of, draw attention to how Akande is thinking about, himself as an alpha male. And another instance is when Sadia broke the news that, she's doing a master's degree. And here Akande responded, "I made it clear to you when you came here the last time, acting all remorseful, that you must run your plans by me and obey my instructions. Listen to me and listen well. You must discontinue with that program forthwith. If you go ahead and obtain a master's degree without my approval, you will never find anything worthwhile to do with it." We can think about the register of command, their imperative statement that is actually asking Sadia to, do something without our own will or consent. And again, that followed series of courses. But what I want to draw attention to here is how Sadia remains subject to this kind of commandment. And I'm also going to make an argument about Mofe himself, even though Mofe exhibits, madness as a result of drug abuse. And in this moment of madness, it displays patriarchal neurosis. And I'm arguing that it is patriarchal consciousness that structures his life by directing violence at Sadia's body and mind. And what I'm trying to argue here is that whenever she is under the madness, Sadia is the only target, not Sheson, the son. He's always protecting Sheson, even Sheson's possession, but always dispossessing Sadia. And what I'm trying to argue here is that there seems to be kind of overlap between, his so-called madness as a result of drug abuse, which in so many ways, foregrounds or sort of projects, a kind of patriarchal neurosis that's already there, that then, erupts at the moment of madness. Because I wonder why its violence is not directed at anyone else, even his son, but only at Sadia's body and mind. So I'm just going to conclude briefly here that, of course, many of the women in the novels, none of them resist the patriarchal commandment. And I think that is one aspect I would love the author to, reflect on. They all seem to be obedient subjects, right? Without threatening the patriarchal in any way. And, but I will conclude by saying that Akande's The Truth About Sadia is an incisive feminist representation of patriarchal power that also raises profound questions about the ethics of care in a post-colonial society. In this intersectional analysis of the social malady of mental and patriarchal disorder, Akande's work calls for radical social change. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Gabriel Bangoshe for that fascinating review of the truth about Sadia. We're very happy to announce that Doyin Agoru is back with us. So we're going to take Doyin fresh, as though you hadn't been with us. We're going to introduce you again.
Thank you.
All over again. We can't get enough of you. Welcome back. Okay. Dr. Adedoyin Agoru is a recipient of the Association of Nigerian Authors Oyo Distinction Award in 2022. She holds degrees in international relations, English studies, and comparative studies from Obafemi Awolowo University, former University of Ife. She was a visiting scholar at the Arts Research Center, Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan in 2007. Her research interests include related discourses, comparative studies, national and cultural identity, specifically Nigerian and Japanese theatrical traditions. An insightful playwright and director, her work includes Refugees of the Great Lakes, Stolen Seeds and She, these are plays, A Voyage Around W.S. Wole Soyinka, biographical narrative, and Drama in Africa, a critical text. Doyin is editor of Studies in Transnational Africa and Japan, and she's currently director for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at the University of Ibadan. She's an associate professor at the Department of English, University of Ibadan. So over to you, Doyin, for your views, your comments of the truth about Sadia.
Thank you. So I'll just try to put it together again. So I said I began my reflections about the truth about Sadia, commending the author for the excellent job she did on the themes that she's worked on, the positive energy that she's generated, by taking on these themes. And I talked about drug abuse as a real menace in our society and the dimensions this has taken. I also observed that Akande, in portraying the Yaba Psychiatric Hospital and the success rates achieved when the patient cooperates, also shows that there's hope for those who genuinely want to be free from drug abuse and its attendant challenges. So I think that the truth about Sadia is coming at the right time, and there must be an effort to place this book in the hands of as many people as possible, young, old, and across gender, to see the reality of the consequences of substance abuse, particularly
Everyone, I'll give Doyin, another opportunity to present when she comes back. And so I think it's best to move on to Kayode Kofoworola now. What I'd like to say about Doyin when she comes is that she is encouraged to record her presentation and send it in to LSA, and they can graft it onto the recording. And that's the best I can hope for if she can't manage to come back. But we do have a little bit of time. So let's hear from Kayode Kofoworola now. And then and see how it goes, play it by ear. Okay, so let me introduce Kayode Koforola, who's here with us. Welcome, Kayode. Are you gonna give us video? Can you unmute your...
Okay, I'm on mute now.
Are you gonna let us see your face?
Sir.
Okay, hello, Kayode. So
Hello,
welcome to
thank you.
Kayode Koforola, to this panel, Engaging the Truth About Sadia by Dr. Lola Akande. Kayode Koforola holds a PhD in literature.
All right, am I clear to start?
Let me introduce you. Let me introduce you.
Okay.
Before you go ahead and present. Kayode Koforola holds a PhD in literature from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. He is presently a senior lecturer in the Department of English, University of Lagos, Akoka. He is a fellow of the Institute of Critical Social Inquiry in New York. He has won several travel grants, including the Heidelberg Spring Academy PhD Candidates Conference Grant, the ICSI Travel Grant to New York, and the British Council of Northern Ireland Travel Grant to Belfast for conferences. His areas of interest include translation studies, psychoanalytical literature, African and Caribbean literature, madness in literature, comedy, cultural studies, and African American literature. He has published both locally and internationally. His most recent publication is titled Shakespeare in Other Tongues, Translation and Adaptation into Yoruba and Hausa in Text, Film, and Stage Productions in Nigeria, in Kristen Bezio and Anthony Russell's William Shakespeare, and 21st Century Culture, Politics, and Leadership. He describes his literary interests as eclectic and still in flux. So welcome, Kayode Koforola, and we're looking forward to hearing from you, your comments and your responses to the truth about Sadia.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'd like to apologize for not being there physically. I had hoped to be there, but I had to attend to a medical emergency outside of Lagos, and so I'm presenting from inside of a car. So I hope that I'm audible enough for everyone to hear me. I would just like to take a slice of my comments on the truth about Sadia. I'd written a review about the truth about Sadia at its presentation, so I wouldn't want to spend so much time on the entirety of what I had written previously. But I would like to take an aspect of the truth about Sadia, which has to do with the problem of stigmatization of individuals with mental health issues. And we find that stigmatization is not just a problem of the person who is being stigmatized, it is also a problem of the family, or for the family of the individual who is being stigmatized, as well as for the society. So that aspect of the truth about Sadia is important, because we find that the idea of stigmatization makes it difficult for people to accept the problem of the mental health struggles that individuals go through in the society. And that's evident even from the story of Aremo, Mofe's uncle, who from the beginning understood and knew that Mofe had mental health issues, of course, which was his own doing. But of course, he knew that Mofe had mental issues, but wouldn't disclose that to Sadia. So Sadia becomes a victim of the absence of that knowledge. And the reason why Aremo would not disclose that mental health issue is also because of family reputation. So that is an aspect of the truth about Sadia that I find intriguing. And I see that that aspect of stigmatization is also extended to Sadia in her place of work. In fact, there's an excerpt in the story where Sadia is mocked by her colleagues at work for the displays, the so-called displays of Mofe at the school gate. We also see how Mofe is dismissed from work by the company that he works for, instead of being given the requisite assistance that mental health patients would naturally require. We see that that at the end of the day, because Mofe's mental health situation is not given the attention that it needs, he becomes a victim of his own of his extended family plot that eventually leads to his death. Overall, I described The Truth About Sadia as a very ambitious novel with so many strands to the story. But the core of the story still remains the idea that in our society, as we speak, we do have an epidemic. I think that in addition to the very different strains of interpretation that can be offered regarding the truth about Sadia, I think perhaps one of the main crux for the author is an attempt to challenge that epidemic that we do have in the society, that epidemic of drugs that is creating mental health crisis for individuals, for families, and for the society. And she's trying to create an awareness about the need to tackle this problem. And in the course of doing that, of course, she layers up a lot of other issues that she addresses in the text. For me, The Truth About Sadia raises a lot more questions than it provides answers. And I don't know, I've listened to the earlier speakers, and I can see why I did think at the very beginning that it raises a lot more questions. Questions like, what do a society, what is the role of society in keeping people sane? What is the role of society in keeping people sane? What is the role of the family in protecting the mental health of individuals? How does the mental health of one individual impact tremendously on the mental health of another? As we see Mofe's mental health impact on Sadia's own mental health, and seem to create for Sadia a sense, a kind of sense of neurosis herself, as she tries to contend with the issues that her husband's mental health creates for her. And ultimately, we see that at the end, even when Mofe dies, Sadia herself is not completely delivered from that mental health crisis and would need to find a space to get healing for herself. So this is one aspect of the novel that interests and intrigues me. Of course, there are other plethora of issues like the poverty situation. How does poverty impact on mental health? You know, how does environment impact? How does the environment in which you live impact on your mental health? So these are some of the things that of recently I've been taking a look again at as I ruminate on the truth about Sadia. Thank you very much.
You're muted.
Yes, I am muted.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. We've heard from some really compelling speakers today with their views, responses to the truth about Sadia. We almost heard from Joey twice. And as I've suggested, she should record her review and send it in. And we request that the LSA conference organizers graft it into the recording as best they can. So now we're looking forward to hearing the response of Lola to the various comments about her really enthralling novel. So over to you, Dr. Lola Akande, author of The Truth About Sadia. Please respond.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you so much for your comments, for your observations, and for your views. First, I would like to address the problem of the editorial problems like typo errors and all that. I'm sorry, this is part of the problems we have in this environment where you don't get enough people to look at the work, and so it is also the reason I have immediately reprinted. And so the book already is in its second edition because of the errors I noticed and which I have tried to correct. That is not to say that I can swear that there will be no errors in this edition, because it's a continuous struggle. And the important thing is to not give up and to just continue to try. So having said that, now I have a response that I prepared before I listened to the views expressed, and I would just like to read that. Thereafter, if anybody wants to ask me specific questions, I'll be ready to answer. So here I go. My intention in this novel is to make the novel a multi-layered story, to create stories within the story. In my initial response, however, I'm going to be speaking about 3 of my motivations for the novel. And the first one is about substance abuse and its implications on society. Substance abuse, in this novel, I've tried to show that the story is the story of a larger society. The story and the problem in The Truth About Sadia meanders through the family and passes on to society. In this way, therefore, I set out to show that the truth about Sadia's marriage is the truth about my society. It is the truth about Nigeria. By showing that Mofe's problem is Sadia's problem, I try to imply that their problem is our problem. It is everyone's problem. What I then try to interrogate in the novel is this. When people encounter such a problem, where do they run to, apart from family? I try to show that we have this problem in Nigeria. It is a very big problem. We don't know how to solve it. And that if people encounter this problem, where do we go? Where do we turn to? The 2 families in this novel are dysfunctional. In both families, patriarchal authority, resentment, castigation, and stigmatization are what make the news. The city is also dysfunctional. So if this is the situation with individuals who encounter this kind of problem, where do they turn to? There ought to be a social involvement. The absence of a social involvement in the novel is my way of pointing out that there is no social intervention in my country today. And I'm appealing that there should be. So my aim is to conscientize the authorities in my society, to appeal to them, to give a thought, to have citizens who encounter this kind of problem can find help. That is outside of the family. Citizens have the right, it should be part of their right and their privileges to be able to access help. I don't see it in my society. And that is why it is practically non-existent in the novel. Now, the second motivation for me is to explore family, sibling relationships, sibling conflict, sibling rivalry, sibling envy, sibling animosity are universal themes in literature. William Shakespeare explored these subjects in many of his plays, including, but not limited to, King Lear, The Taming of the Shrew, Richard III, and As You Like It, and so many others. The Tempest, and so many others. However, what I try to do in The Truth About Sadia is to explore the peculiar Nigerian dimension to sibling animosity and family feud. If you are a Nigerian, it is likely that you are familiar with expressions such as home trouble, village people, and the like. The idea of home trouble, the idea of village people, is rooted in a belief system in which people think that other people, particularly their relatives, have the power and the influence to negatively alter the course of their lives. That is to say that your relatives can change your destiny, especially remotely. It is part of our belief system as Nigerians. So what I try to do here is to explore it. This is common. This is a common belief amongst us, Nigerians. Consciously or involuntarily, we recognize the power or the non-power of this belief in the shaping of our lives because we share the same social milieu. I have a personal story. When I gave birth to my son, my mom personally, and wordlessly put my son's umbilical stump in my palm because it had fallen off in my absence. Not knowing what to do with it, I took it. My mom didn't say anything, so I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say to her, so I accepted it, but I didn't know what to do with it. So what I did was I went and kept it in my wardrobe amongst my clothes. Surprisingly, when my husband noticed that my son no longer had his umbilical stump in his navel, he asked me where it was. That was when I realized that, does it have any significance? Is it important? So he asked me, Lola, where is it? Where is the stump? So I said to him, I had kept it, which was the truth. I had kept it in my wardrobe. But I was shocked when he instructed me to keep it well, because we would need it when we're going, anytime we're going to the village. So I said, need it? Why? He said his eldest brother had instructed him to bring it home. So I asked him, what is his elder brother wanted to do? And he told me he did not know. So an alarm bell rang in my brain. I began to ask myself, what's the significance of my mother's action? My mother had given me this thing. She said nothing. She just gave it to me. It then occurred to me that maybe my son's destiny was in my hand. Maybe that's why my mother did not do away with it. She could have disposed of it. She could have done anything she wanted. She's my mother. But she made the point of giving it to me, and she said nothing when she gave it to me. So I interpreted her action to mean that probably my son's destiny was in my hand, and my mother was probably instructing me to protect my son. So what did I do? I found a way to dispose of the stump, the umbilical stump. And then my husband kept reminding me, Lola, I hope you are keeping it well. I hope you are keeping it well. We are taking it to the village. We are taking it to the village. And so I kept telling him that I had kept it and I kept it well. So when it was time for us to go to the village, he then asked me, Lola, so have you packed it? Have you packed it? And it was at this point I lied to him, and I told him that I could no longer find it. This anecdote is not intended to cast aspersions on my brother-in-law, and that has nothing to do with the story. Neither do I intend to suggest that my brother-in-law had evil plans towards his own nephew. What I'm trying to explain is this, that this is part of our belief system as a people. And Nigerians can relate. They understand what I'm saying. So this is what I therefore try to explore in this novel. And the question I'm asking is that, is it true? And that's why in the prologue, so let's have a maggot. Let's have somebody, because Nigerians believe in these things. So let's have a maggot. To what extent can this maggot affect Sadia? It's an interrogation. And Nigerians and non-Nigerians alike can interpret and explain, as they like. And the last thing I try to do is about the old versus new Nigerian writing. Critics of Nigerian literature like Professor Charles Nonim and Professor Dai Zebaye have argued that there is a general absence of depth and commitment in the works of contemporary Nigerian writers. They claim that there are no big issues in the works of new writers, that contemporary Nigerian writers take on frivolous and trivial subjects which limit their sense of commitment and patriotism. I agree that there's a topicality in the works of old Nigerian writers that we can't miss, and the writers may have exhausted this theme. However, among other arguments, I hold that the new books of Lagos have tried to create a Lagos dimension that has come to its own. I'm a contemporary Nigerian novelist writing from home, and therefore I present the truth about Sadia as an addition to the growing Lagos genre. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lola. Thank you so much, Dr. Lola Akande, for that prepared response. But we have 5 more minutes. Would you like to respond to individual speakers before we just take a few questions? Please do. We have 5 more minutes to hear from Lola responding to individual speakers. Would you like to do that, Lola?
Yes, but I don't know what to respond to from what people have said. Yeah. Okay. There's one about why was Sadia giving the termination letter of her husband, not the husband herself. She's made to sign it. Why she's made to sign it? Well, because in Nigeria, we do a lot of illegalities take place. It is also to question, what the employers of Fed did, which I believe they have no right to do. But most times, Nigerians feel helpless. And so we find them doing what they are not supposed to do, probably because of lack of proper education, lack of proper understanding of their rights, of their privileges, of what they are not obliged to do. And it happens every time. So because the husband is mentally unwell, stable, they decide that, okay, the next thing to do is to give it to the wife. Once they have given it to the wife, they are giving it to the man, which is wrong. But Nigerians often do not bother to go into the intricacies of their rights. It's the same reason a policeman will stop you on the road and demand for what he's not supposed to ask from you. And you are complying, you are obeying, and you are begging. Because you don't know your right, you do not know your rights. So that's why that is there. I don't know if there's any. Okay, characters are, they do not like justice. The characters tend not to like justice. I think it is also part of our own belief system, where you just take everything for granted. Sometimes the sense of justice is lost on you. You don't even know what you are supposed to be doing. So we accept a lot of things. It's part of us, it's very common amongst us. And when you find people who are trying to say, this is how it should be, they say you are too low, you are derided, you are mocked, you are just expected to accept things. Yeah.
I'd like to just make some points drawn from the other presentations, Lola, that you might be able to respond to, please. I loved what Gabriel Bangoshe talked about, patriarchal madness, and in the book. And it ties very neatly in Kayode Koforola's comment about the role of one member of family's madness, the impact of the madness of one member, mental health of one member of the family, impacting the mental health of another member of the family. And so I think it's something you can please talk to us about patriarchal madness and mental health and this sort of just talk to us about that in your book.
I'm not sure what
Aremo and Aki, their patriarchal madness. Or maybe Gabriel, you'd like to take it up and phrase a better question than mine for Lola.
Why do they explain?
Gabriel, hand over to Gabriel.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to read the intersection of the question of madness and patriarchy, and how patriarchy itself becomes a form of madness, a form of social neurosis. And I wonder what you think about that intersection. And the other question is especially about the representation. And I think you sort of answered that, none of the women, resist, they are all just, they comply, they're all obedient, docile subjects, and I wonder why, that happens in this context of what I'm calling patriarchal madness, generally.
If I can just quickly say something to that, Dr. Abangoshe. So this is where my own view of your conclusion with regard to whether women didn't respond, very well differs. I do think that in this novel, the portrayals of men, the men portrayed in this novel, they are buffoons, all of them. There is not one man, or of course, there's an exception. That's two men actually, and those are Uncle Aremo's, younger brother, the third one, whose name is eluding me now, and then there is the other man who Sadia, is longing to marry now, which is where I'm thinking this novel might require a sequel. We want to know whether that marriage happens in that sense. But at all, largely, the other men, they are completely, monsters. That's the way they're, portrayed. Yeah. I don't. The women, Sadia resists in certain instances only that gullibility, as Kali, nicely put it here. She's always open to this thing of again and again, and what she's supposed to avoid comes again, she takes it and waits again, and it comes again. So there is that there. But I do think that on some point, the women are a bit, more, better portrayed than the men.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
I just want to add that, frankly, if you are in Nigeria, you would sense how overwhelming the patriarchal madness is. And frankly, it is only very strong women like Sadia that would try to challenge. And, even attempting to challenge, comes with its own difficulties. And that's why there are limitations to that, the power, the patriarchal power, the oppression, the injustice, the mistreatment is just so overwhelming. And that's why we see that, Sadia tries and tries and tries to overcome, but in the end, when she realizes that there's just no way, then she decides that, okay, the only thing to do is to live her own life and try to do the best she can, be the best that she can be. And frankly, that's what most women have to do, in this country, because the sense of patriarchy, of oppression, is more real than magic, frankly. Sometimes if you try to put it into writing, it will appear as if you are exaggerating.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lola. Can we hear from Doyin? Doyin finally joined us. Doyin, can you make a few comments, ask a few questions?
Thank you.
Of the author?
Yes, so I think I'll just ask questions. The question that Dr. Bangoshe is raising, say that Akande's portrayal, and I wanted her to unriddle me on that, was why she had created characters like Sadia and the other women. So for instance, that time span over about 20 years, and then until Sheson grows up and she's 50. So I'm curious about the way the women are portrayed. Shadia's colleague, that wicked lady, taunting her about her husband's madness. Then the way she has also positioned Shadia's brother's wife and Mofe's brother's wife. The wives are also gullible, they don't ask any question, and then the women are subdued by these wicked brothers. I'm also more curious about Sadia. The one was planted in her body to make her repel men. But was it planted in her body for her to become unintelligent? And then we see another pliant and gullible personality. For me, there are many ways that one could explain away some of the decisions Sadia makes. But the point that she decides to go with Edema, the married man who takes advantage of her, the world had fallen off. What was it? Then I also ask questions about plausibility, that we could understand if she did not have a relationship with Wale while they were working together. By the time he went to Jos, what was stopping her from having a relationship with him? And then why would Wale wait for 20 years to come back to her. I'm asking questions about possibility. Then I'm also thinking that, are you saying that Sadia herself never thought that she was jazzed, that she had a spiritual problem, even when that worm pops out? So I wanted to also ask a question about the villains. You know, and Dr. Akande has been able to let them off the hook. We have villainous characters. She denies us that purgation of emotions. You know, when you let them off the hook, so there are no consequences. What happens to the witch doctor? Is it the popping out of the worm that led to his death? I'm also curious that, and after the worm popped out, did she become free of those misfortunes? What was the real impact of that had been set free? Then, you know, we also expect that in the archetypal context of good or evil, we wonder what happens to Aremo, who runs Mofe over and tries to bully Sadia? What happens to Shadia's brother, you know, who has been so evil, you know, and then the gruesome murder of Mofe, we have no information about their fate. You know, are they just going, have they been pardoned? Or, you know, I mean, the other man that we understand killed the MBA student in Ife, there's a sense of satisfaction that the society has when we hear that he's going to be jailed or he's going to be hanged, you know. So I also look at the theme of self-destruction.
Joey, sorry to interrupt. You've asked a lot of questions. So let Lola take one or two of those questions. And as I suggested, please record your presentation and they will integrate it, hopefully, into the overall recording at the end. Thank you so much. So Lola, would you like to just respond to a couple of those questions?
Yes, just like one. I know we don't have time. Yes, the issue of, you know, the didactic nature of African literature and the fact that I failed to let justice come to people like Aremo, characters like Aremo. It is because this is a novel that's going to have a sequel.
Oh.
And in the world of literature, when you create your characters, you have the power to kill them when you want to kill them, and then you let them live for them to fulfill other purposes. So a sequel is coming, you know, to this novel, and I have very important role for Aremo in this sequel that will come, that will focus more on Sesson, the son, and that will focus more on stigmatization. You know, so this is the reason I have decided to let Aremo be for now, because I need him. I need him to be alive. I need Aremo to be alive. And also, I also know that even in real life, frankly, if we expect that everybody who does evil is struck down immediately, frankly, this world would have been thoroughly depopulated. The reason evil persists in this life is because people continue to do evil and they continue to survive without, you know, punishment. So there's a sense in which, before the arrival of the sequel, we can say that, well, yes, Aremo is just one of those lucky ones. They keep on doing evil, and it seems as if God is not even taking up. But frankly, the main purpose, the reason is because I intend to have a sequel. And this sequel is also going to take me back to the university campus, where I will also look at the university.
Thank you very much, Lola. I'd like to round up this fascinating discussion because we actually needed a lot more time. But Carly Curti asked a question in her presentation that, Lola, I think you could answer to round up the session, which is the NDLEA endorsement. What exactly does that mean, and how does that impact, or maybe on the distribution of your book, of your novel?
Yes, the NDLEA came and said that this is the first novel they are seeing in Africa that deals with this subject, and that they are impressed, and that although they, according to them, because they came to University of Lagos, and they said they are aware that this issue has been addressed in books in other parts of the world, but that it is the first one they are seeing in Africa. And therefore, they want to make the novel part of their material, as part of their effort to fight drug addiction. That's what they told me. That's what they told us at Unilag. And so far, and that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Lola. Carly, would you like to say anything? Because I asked you a question. Would you like to expand on that before we round up?
No, I was just curious about whether you know who your readers are. Are they young women? Are they? Is it set as a set text in schools? Maybe one doesn't have knowledge about who the readers are and where they are, but I'd like to know.
Okay, the other thing is schools have been inviting me, they will, particularly secondary schools, they've been inviting me to come and use the novel to speak to their students. They buy copies, they put in the library, and they ask their students to read, and they ask me to come and talk to their students about it. So far, that is what I know. And recently, the National Library has also contacted me. The National Library of Nigeria has contacted me to say that they would like to work with me regarding this book. They would want me to go with them to schools, to educate students. So far, that's all I know.
Okay, thank you. Lola, I'd like to say something. I would like you to put you in touch with Dr. Ojo, who heads the National Mental Health Plan Desk at the Federal Ministry of Health. I don't know if you know him. And that desk manages the mental health, neurological diseases, and substance abuse disorder. And the National Mental Health Desk was set up in 2022. So I think that you should get together with them as well. Maybe they may have some way of coordinating with you, synergizing with you for the distribution. I don't know, it's just a suggestion. Because I think it's as we all have, agreed, this is a very big issue and it cuts across so much else. Mental health does cut across the way our families are structured as well, as particularly traditional families. So thank you very much to all the participants, all the panelists, to Ademola Adeshola of Mount Royal University, Canada, Doyin Agboru, Gabriel Bangoshe of University of California, Doyin is of University of Ibadan, Kayode Koforola of University of Lagos, and Kali Kurti of the Journal of African Cultural Studies. Thank you for joining us to engage with the wonderful, important novel, The Truth About Sadia by our esteemed colleague and friend, Dr. Lola Akande. Thank you so very much for fascinating discussions. And I hope I see some of you at the conference, the physical conference. I will be joining later on today. And Lola, again, apologies from me for completely getting everything muddled up and thinking that this was a 100% virtual webinar. I will see you. And I've left my phone number in the direct messages. Okay, so please text me so that we can get together. You can sign my book when I get to the venue later on today. Congratulations, Lola, and thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye, Kali. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.